So once again, welcome to the Application Insight event. This is a Clear Admit event, and it's going to tackle all things deferred enrollment. We've got four wonderful deferred enrollment MBA programs that we're going to feature today, and four reps from those schools. So let's sort of dive in. We're going to have a whole bunch of sort of Q&A with our guests, and then we're actually going to allow each of our panelists to head off into a private sort of breakout room at the end of this session where you all can go and ask them questions. So just to sort of get started here, I'm going to moderate. My name is Graham Richmond. I'm the co-founder of Clear Admit, and I'm mostly going to try to stay out of the way and so that we can hear as much as possible from the admissions representatives that have joined us today. So let's move on and introduce those folks, actually. So first up, we've got Eric Askins. He's the executive director of full-time MBA admissions at Berkeley's Haas School of Business. Hi, Eric. Thanks for joining us.
Hi, Graham. Thanks so much for having me.
The pleasure's mine. Next up, we've got Gina Cicchetti, and she is an associate director of master's admissions at Carnegie Mellon University's Tepper School of Business. Hey, Gina.
Hi. Thank you again for having us.
It's always a pleasure. Next up, we've got Jacob Parry, who's the Assistant Director of Admissions and Student Recruitment over at Chicago Booth. Welcome, Jacob.
Thanks for having us, Graham. I appreciate it.
Sure. Pleasure is ours. And last but not least, we've got Morgan Janella, who's the Director of Admissions at Columbia Business School. Welcome, Morgan.
Thank you for organizing. Happy to be here and speak with everybody today.
Great. Yeah, it's so nice to have everyone. I know that some of you are in very snowy territory. Obviously, I guess Eric is not, being on the West Coast in the Bay Area, but I know there's been quite a bit of snow of late. So hopefully we can, everyone's indoors and staying warm. So let's move on though and just talk a little bit first about what is a deferred enrollment MBA. I just want to make sure that everyone who's joining us today has a kind of clear sense of these things. So basically, a traditional full-time MBA that I think many people are familiar with involves, working for a while. You graduate from college, you go off and work, sometimes anywhere from like 2 to, 6, 7, 8, 9 years. And then you pursue an MBA and you actually apply after you've had that work experience. And the difference between a traditional MBA and a deferred MBA is that you actually can apply while you're in college, often as a senior in university. In some cases, schools will even allow you to apply if you're in a master's program that has begun right after undergraduate. And you can apply and sort of reserve your seat in effect. And what I mean by that is, you go through the admissions process, the school makes you an offer of admission, and we'll get into it with each of our panelists. But in essence, you're typically allowed to go and work for anywhere from 2 to 5 years. And then you start business school. And we'll get into some of the big differences that sort of implies when we talk to our panelists. But I just want to make sure everyone understood that a deferred MBA is just, you're just sort of getting in early and getting to sort of hold your spot in advance. And I think it's a great initiative that a lot of these schools have brought into play. So let's keep going here. We've got some additional sort of background and questions. So we're going to start with these sort of roundtable questions that I wanted to get into. And I did want to remind everyone who's tuned in that because we're going to have individual breakout rooms for each of our panelists to head into, we're going to hold all Q&A for those sessions, right? So obviously, if there's an urgent thing that you need, you can put it in the chat box here or the Q&A, but ideally just hold on to your questions and you can address them directly to one of our panelists when we wrap up here, because they're each going to have their own room. But moving right along, I wanted to get into these sort of roundtable questions, and there are two of them. The first is, why should someone consider a deferred enrollment or an early access MBA? And when might it be better for a candidate to sort of hold off and follow a more traditional MBA application path? So let's start with Eric. Eric, do you want to try to tackle these questions for us?
Sure, Graham. Thanks so much for getting the opportunity to dig into some of these. I guess sure. I'll start with that first question here, which is, why should someone consider a deferred enrollment program? Now, a lot of the conversations that I've had in this space have been with folks who are very concrete in their plans. They know the journey that they're on. They know how a business education is going to help advance them in that journey. Now, that does not mean that those individuals necessarily have a specific job function or job industry that they've sort of are married to and can't possibly change from. But it does mean that they understand what is the community they want to serve? What is the problem that they want to tackle? How do they want to address a certain concern, or how do they want to, where do they see themselves and where they can have the most impact? Folks with that very strong plan who want to secure a seat to allow them to build, develop, test their hypothesis, and then come back and gain that education to kind of move them forward, or gain that network to move them forward, or to add that additional layer to what they're currently learning to move them forward. Those are folks for whom a deferred enrollment program makes a lot of sense. Again, knowing that you've got a solid plan in which business education is a function that's a required part of advancing you in that plan is a really strong reason to consider a program like this. For those folks who are explorers, folks who think a business education might be valuable but want to try a bunch of different things, this may not be the ideal fit. They may need to take the 2 years at Deloitte or some other firm and kind of explore a little bit and decide, is this right for me? Do I want to stay in these other spaces? Is this the degree that's going to advance me? Are there other degrees that might advance me? Some folks discover that they want to actually narrow down rather than broaden out, in which case they might look for a very specialized degree. And for those folks, this might not be the right plan. So I often encourage people, if you are in your graduating year, if you're undergraduate or a graduate institution, and you're thinking of a program like this, think about what you want to do with it. Not just what the program is, what do you want to do with it? What do you want to accomplish with it? Can you get there another way? Is this the way that you want to get there? And if you've got that framework, if you're solid that way, then this might be right for you.
Okay, yeah, that makes a lot of sense. Gina, is there anything that you want to add to Eric's response?
I think Eric did a really great job of answering both questions. So I thank you for that. No, there's really nothing I can think to add at this moment.
Yeah, Eric, you did do a really good job of summarizing this, but I'm going to still ask, I don't know if Jacob, do you have anything that you wanted to add?
Yeah, I can briefly add. We have students who often consider the deferred enrollment path as opposed to the traditional path, not only just because they have that business plan in mind, they know they want to go to business school, that's a career goal of theirs and something that they're going to try to accomplish no matter what, but it also allows them to pursue a different level of quote unquote risk in the job market post-grad. So they're able to, because they know that they're potentially going to have that business school locked in right away, they can take some, untraditional career risks that they may not have taken. A common example we typically see is candidates who do have an offer to go to Deloitte, BCG, some of these top consulting firms and, get out to the business world right away, but they also have offers from startups and they consider the startup to be a little bit of a riskier option. But it's more exciting. It gives different career perspectives for the students to bring into the school once they matriculate. So that option of having the deferred program in the back pocket can allow them to take some early career risks that they may not otherwise take.
Yeah, that's a good point. So I think, so far we have this kind of idea of there are people out there who know they want an MBA, for whom this makes sense if they know what they want to do with the MBA. But then there's also this notion of, the added ability to take some risks and things with those years in between undergrad and starting the MBA. Morgan, is there anything that you wanted to add on these two kind of roundtable questions here?
Sure. I mean, everyone definitely hit many points already. I think the one thing I would add is, as many of you, I assume, are college seniors, generally speaking, you have a bit more time in your life as a college senior than when you're working full time. So just also logistically, when putting together applications or prepping for a standardized test, generally speaking, you might have a bit more flexibility and time in your schedules now to do that prep work. So even if you take your standardized test now, typically your scores will be valid for about 5 years. Obviously, always check with every school's policy, individual policy. But maybe an advantage of submitting a deferred application or early access application now is, you maybe only have 3 or 4 classes this last semester. I think your schedule just might be a bit more easy for you than when you jump into that full-time job. You got to go to work every day. There's not as much homework, but your schedules will change a bit. So just also ease could be a reason to consider thinking about applying this time in your student life.
Yeah, and Morgan, you're actually raising an issue, a kind of really good piece of advice around whether someone does deferred or not. I think the idea of taking the test while you're in college still is really brilliant, because your academic chops are a bit more fresh than they might be if you wait a few years. I can attest to this, having gone through the process myself and having waited to take the test until I was several years out of undergrad. So it is a good time to not only maybe apply and pursue a deferred enrollment option, but at minimum to get the test out of the way while you're still kind of in an academic sort of mindset. All right, but let's move on. I wanted to give each program a little bit of a chance to talk about their the features and everything. And I guess before we go there, I did want to outline just some of the basic things that you might not know that you need to bring to the process, right? So in terms of like what goes into an application, all of these schools are going to have an online application form that you need to fill out. In some cases, there may or may not be an application fee. It depends on the school. You will have to provide transcripts from your undergraduate institution. And I suppose at some point we may get into some of the nuances of like, how does that work if you're applying in the spring and you don't have your final semester done yet? So someone may comment on that later. You have to submit a standardized test in most cases, I believe, a resume. There are going to be essays, and we will get into what types of essay questions the schools ask. Most of these programs also require recommendation letters. They will conduct interviews, and there may be a language exam if you're a non-native English speaker. So those are the basic sort of components. And I think we have another slide here as well with just some of the deadlines. So I know that someone was asking in the chat earlier when the deadlines are. So this gives you a sense. The good news here is that we are still a couple of months out from these deadlines. So you've got a lot of time. Now, I don't want everyone to rest on their laurels, but there is some time still to kind of work through everything. So just so you know, and again, we'll share this presentation with everyone who's attending. We're recording it, so no need to frantically scribble these things down. That's also information that's readily available on the school websites. But let's move on. We have this next section. What we thought we would do is just give each program a chance to talk a little bit about what it is that makes their program unique. We thought it would also be interesting to just give them a chance to highlight one aspect of their admissions process that they want you to be aware of. So we'll start with Eric again over at Berkeley. We're just going alphabetically here. So Eric, do you want to just walk us through a little bit of, a little bit about the program and something about the admissions process you want everyone to know?
Thanks. There's a couple of things. So on the previous slide, Graham had showed a couple of components of an application with a few notes there for us to talk about here. The first thing I would like to talk about has to do with the fact that we have now run this program for 3 years without an application fee. And this is very intentional. We launched this program 3 years ago. We understood that there was a desire for many people in the community to consider a deferred program, to get access to move forward in a program in the future. And we didn't want to create obstacles or barriers. So in that same token, let's talk about other obstacles or barriers to submitting an application. And we've created a step-by-step guide that lives on our website that it should be easy to find under applications for accelerated access. And that's really important for us. We do not expect you to have done the level of research that many people who are applying for direct admissions do. The data shows for us that people who are applying for direct admissions into a business school program are making that plan as much as 18 months in advance. Now, 18 months in advance of where you are today, it's likely, towards the end of your sophomore, beginning of your junior year of undergraduate. We don't expect that you have identified that this was a pathway that you wanted to pursue that early in that process. And we really want to create a framework where you can go step by step through the application, understand what each component is, understand exactly what we're looking for. We've recorded short videos for you to be able to do that. We think that this is really valuable in an application process because we want to take the process part out of that equation, that concern of, well, what do I do next? And what are the steps? And what's the order? And how do I do that? So that you can focus on the content part, because that's really where the value is for us, is to understand who you are. I mentioned before that what our values are around plan, more so than around a specific job title or job function in the future. And so I guess when we talk about the program, the other piece that I'd love to talk about is that period of conditional admission, that period in the 2 to 5 year deferment when potentially you are part of our community, but you're yet to decide exactly when you're going to matriculate with us, when you're going to begin that journey with us. We actually schedule specific events, opportunities to do workshops with our career services office, We created a community for students to engage with one another so they get a sense of who else is traveling this journey with them. It's defined by cohorts, so the year that you are admitted, but it's also broken up so you can talk to people who were potentially admitted in a future year, because you may matriculate at different times, right? With that 2 to 5 year window, there may be people who are aiming for 2024 or 2025, no matter when they started that program. And they get to know other people who are traveling this pathway. They get to have somebody who, has that same next step, and they might be in different positions, and they can ask, well, how did you negotiate your first job change? And, what are you looking for when it comes to the type of skills that you want to gain? Jacob mentioned a very interesting thing, which is the number of people who are pursuing a startup or more risky opportunity. This is a space where people can actually share what they're learning from their failures as well as their successes. And that often happens when people are taking those riskier moves. So we really think that's an important feature of the program, not just when you apply, not just when you matriculate, but this period in between. It's a new space for us, only 2 to 3 years into it. We're exploring it, we're understanding what works and what doesn't. We found that an online community is very robust, but that might just be a pandemic created scenario. It's a really fun and interactive way to get to know what people are doing, like posting social as well as professional journey. And that's a feature that I really like to lean into. Thanks for the opportunity.
Yeah, no, that's terrific. Really interesting. I see we're still getting some questions in the chat box. So obviously, just want to remind everyone at the end of this session, each of the schools is going to go into an individual breakout where you can ask them questions. And we are trying to get to some of them as we go here, but we're going to try to stay on track too. So let's move on. But thanks, Eric, for shedding some light on your process. Let's hear from Gina now about Carnegie Mellon Tepper's Future Business Leaders Program.
Yes, thank you. So similar to Berkeley, we do have a chart your path section on our website that does walk you through the application, but also get to know the school. I think, this is, even though you want to pursue your MBA, you're just maybe not at that moment, you still want to, consider the school, the community, and where you'll feel comfortable being a part of when it does come time for you to matriculate. So we have the chart your path on our website as well. And again, while you don't have to maybe know exactly what you're doing, just having those goals and sharing with us in the application, I think is important. We just want to know your ideas, where you're hoping, your life will lead you in your career over the next few years before you matriculate. And, in reference to during this time of deferring, like many of the other schools, you're still part of the Tepper community. And so there are ways to interact, not just with your particular cohort, but, our program's newly launched. So right now we just have one, but the incoming class will be able to interact with last year's, in addition to the sessions with our leadership coaches or career center, the different parts of the community, in addition to alums and current students, is just as valuable. Because again, just because you're delaying your start time, you're still part of the Tepper community, and we want you to feel a part of it when it comes time to matriculate and be ready to start that MBA program.
That makes sense. Yeah, I had forgotten that you guys are newer, and so you've got now that first group coming in who can, shine some light on the path for everyone that follows, which is great. Let's move on and hear from Jacob about Chicago Booth Scholars Program.
Thank you. So much of what everybody has kind of already echoed about the program is very similar with the Booth program. This is open to college seniors planning to graduate in their current academic year, but it goes past that as well. So they are anybody who is in the final year of their bachelor's degree program, if they're in the final year of a joint bachelor's or master's program. And for those who have already graduated from school as well, you're allowed to apply to the program as well. So for example, for our class of 2021 for Booth Scholars, students had to graduate between October 1, 2020 and September 30th, 2021. So there is a gap when you can apply after graduation as well. This doesn't have to be a 4-year degree program either in light of the Bologna Accord. 3-year international degrees fulfill the academic requirements for this as well. And if you're applying when you haven't yet graduated, a degree certificate will be required in the future there. But one thing that we often get, and one question that I frequently get about how kind of our application differs from the traditional MBA side of things and the deferred MBA side of things. Obviously, with the deferred MBA side of things, you're not necessarily in a professional role and you may not have access to the same professional supervisors that you would later on down the application line. As a result, we typically only have one of those recommendations come from a current supervisor. Obviously, there's going to be some unique situations as well. If you work for a family business or your own, you have a startup that you created while you were in school, we request in place of a supervisory reference, you submit a letter from a client or an outside party who you do business with. But that other professional reference doesn't necessarily have to be quote unquote professional. It can be a professional contact. It can be a faculty member. It can be somebody who's worked with you in a club or an organization or on a volunteer project, or an athletics coach. There's many different ways that you can go about the admissions process. And there's different essays that you'll answer as well from the deferred side of things. So specifically, there's a short answer question about what you want to accomplish after graduation and prior to starting your MBA. And that allows you to kind of expand on why the MBA is the right role, for the right path for you. This allows you to kind of expand past just, I want an MBA, and get into the real nitty gritty of your goals with this program.
Thanks, Jacob. Yeah, I was going to say that I think you're underlining an interesting point around the ability to highlight, maybe via recommendation in this case, activities that you're pursuing on campus, leadership opportunities or clubs that you're running or events that you're planning and things like that, that people are often doing as undergraduates. And I think even in the kind of traditional MBA application process, there are times when candidates are sort of like, oh, does everything have to come from my job? And that's not necessarily true. You can pull from anywhere that you're demonstrating great leadership and teamwork experience, et cetera. So yeah, reminding people of that here is terrific, because I think that's often one of the concerns for college students who are considering business school. They're sort of like, look, I have a couple of internships. I can get one letter maybe from one of those, but is it okay that I'm running the student newspaper and I want the editor-in-chief to write about me or something, So there are other options there. Let's move to Morgan. Is there anything that you want to highlight about your program as well as your admissions process?
Thank you, Graham. So again, echoing what a lot of my colleagues said too, our program is flexible for when you would ultimately matriculate at CBS upon admission. We give you that 2 to 5 years. So you have the flexibility to start the program when the time is right for you. Thinking at the beginning of the process with the application process, I will say that applying through deferred enrollment is a bit streamlined. We also do not have an application fee. There are short answer questions as opposed to essay questions. Again, and as Chicago Booth mentioned, we have a lot more flexibility with that one recommendation letter. Is it a faculty member, or is it an internship supervisor, or is it an athletic coach or a club advisor? So you do just have a bit more flexibility. We know you have a lot going on, getting ready for graduation, perhaps still job searching, figuring out your career path. We don't want to stress you out, adding on a very intense application process. So again, like my colleagues mentioned, we're here to talk as well too, whether it'll be in the breakout rooms today or following up with us individually after the event. Definitely always available to ask those nuanced questions you might have. And then the second point to highlight is, I think, just connecting with CBS during the deferral period is so beneficial. We are in our third year now, third or fourth, we're fourth application cycle. So this past fall, we matriculated our first group that came after having 2 years of work experience. So again, we're figuring things out as we go, and we're just so excited to have them here. And they've just shared, we gave them a Slack group early on, and they love their Slack group. Some of them were sad to leave the DEP Slack group to, like, nope, you got to go to the full-time Slack group now. But it's really just that network you get right away. And I've always heard from the traditional full-time students that the 2 years in the program flies by. And even if you apply normally, maybe you're admitted February, March, April. So then you've got 4 or 5 months before you start to, kind of learn about CBS, continue to think about your career goals, start to get to know classmates, start to get to know clubs, centers and programs. As a DEPer, you could have 2, 3, 4 years to dig into CBS and really know what you want to take advantage of when you step in the door, because those 2 years will fly by. This is just like, you got a ton of prep to figure out what resources you want to tap into once you're here at CBS.
Great point. Yeah, I'm gonna put you on the spot, Morgan, about a question that I heard someone ask me the other day that I think is going to apply to everyone here, which is, in all cases, students who get in as a deferred candidate, like everyone's saying, they can work for 2 to 5 years. Or I guess it varies a little bit, but they're going to be working for a bit, and it's not a predetermined amount. It's not like you're all saying you have to work 2 years and then you show up. So I guess the question I have for you is, when does someone have to let you know that they're coming the following fall? Is there any specific like routine to that?
So we do have set dates by which we would need to be informed, and we share these with you upon admission. You have your own personalized admitted student website. So at Columbia Business School, we have 2 entry points. You can start the full-time MBA in August entry or January entry. Generally speaking, we're seeing people interested in the August entry, still very early on, and J-term is a great option for some folks. So for the students that will start in the traditional 2-year program in August, they let us know the previous December. And we want you to let us know the previous December is because we want to then admit you like the normal admit. Come to the admit events with your classmates, apply for financial aid, be evaluated for merit aid with your class. So that's why we do ask. It's for your benefit to have the early planning. And I think this is pretty similar with most of the other schools out there, but you'll let us know the December prior to that upcoming August.
Okay. So just while we're on this topic, Jacob, what's the deadline for you on that? When do people have to tell you?
So we will actually send out a form to all of our admitted scholars sometime in early to mid-January, and then they have to let us know typically by February 1st of their plans to matriculate. Okay.
Gina, how about with you?
We're actually in October or early fall the previous year to applying, very similar to Columbia. And at that point too, if you depending where your career is, if the part-time program might be the better fit for you, we can have that discussion and kind of change your plans. So, but again, like all the schools, we want you to be a part of that, your new cohort, the MBA student, enroll you into that process.
Okay. And Eric, if I've been admitted at Berkeley and when do I have to signal that I want to actually start the MBA program?
So we actually do check-ins each year with every candidate as part of our cohort. And those check-ins are scheduled around November with this intention exactly in mind. If someone lets us know in November that they are interested in matriculating in the following year, then we can, in December, which is when we typically notify our first round of direct admissions, we can incorporate them into that pathway so that they can get the same access to scholarship opportunity and much of the things that were mentioned by my peers here.
Okay, cool. Yeah, that's helpful. Sorry, I know I went off script, guys, but I just wanted, that seemed like an important thing for people to think through. So let's move into the next section though of this session, which is going to be basically about essays. I have some very specific questions or about, specific application components, and I'm going to go in reverse alphabetical just so that Morgan doesn't feel like we've been doing some alphabetical discrimination here. So we're going to go backwards. Morgan, we'll start with you. You have, these are the 2 kind of essays. They're very short. And so I guess the first question I had for you is, it's more about the resume portion, because I know that you guys ask for a resume as one of the application components. And so there was a little note that I saw in the application form that basically says, and I'm probably going to quote this wrong, but it's something like, if candidates have post-undergrad job offers, like if they already know where they might be going when they graduate, that they could include that on the resume. And so I just wanted to ask you the question, like, how would that look? Like, what would you tell someone to do if they were to, let's say they have an offer to go work at company X, like, where do they put that on the resume?
Great question. I'm happy to address this. So I would treat this as your most recent employment opportunity. So generally, many of you will still have your education at the top of your resume because you will just have recently graduated, but then this could be the first job listed at the top, name of the company, your individual title, and expected start date. And then please be sure to delineate if you've accepted the offer or if you are still considering the offer, when you would have to let that company know by. Because the resume is a great snapshot for us of what your professional goals might be. Maybe you have 2 offers and you don't need to decide until April 1. but you want to submit your application beforehand and crossed off your list, that's fine. Just you can put both of these things on your resume. And we recognize you're not going to have the traditional responsibilities and accomplishments listed under those just yet. But again, name of the company, location, your potential title, and expected start date would all be great to list on your resume.
Okay. Appreciate you going into the weeds on this one with us. I just thought it would be a good question for folks to get an answer to. The second thing I wanted to ask you about is one of these essay questions that we see on screen here. And it's the second one about the leader that the person admires. I just wondered, like, any tips on this in the sense of, like, are there any no-nos? Like, do you see a million essays a year that are about Steve Jobs, or, just sort of the same old folks? Like, what should people do? Are there things to avoid? And also, does the person that the candidate chooses need to be somehow reflective of the goals that they have in terms of, like, what kind of a career they want? Like, if they wanted to work in, technology, does it have to be that the person that they're citing as a leader that they admire comes from that domain?
I think the most important part of this question is the end why. There is no right or wrong answer for the leader that you select. It could be anybody. I promise you all that. It really can be anybody, but it's the why. What have you learned from this person? What do you hope to emulate from this person pre-MBA, post-MBA? My individual advice, and I think most of my colleagues support me, we tend to learn more about your career in that first essay. Your resume tends to be obviously more career focused. So think of this second, essays, short answer, whatever you want to call it. Think of this as a second opportunity to give us another insight into you. So maybe it is a bit more personal. Maybe it is a bit more wonky or fun or crazy or serious, whatever it might be. Don't think it has to be career related. It certainly can be. Again, if that is what actually is most important to you and stands out for you right now, is completely fine. But also know that you have a bit of flexibility here for us to get to know you better.
That's perfect. Thanks for addressing that. I'm sure a lot of people are wondering about that. Jacob, let's go to you. I wanted to talk about two things here. One of them is the fact that your main goals essay, which is the first bullet point under the essay section here, obviously has this kind of post-MBA and long-term plan focus. And I know you have a short answer where you ask, well, what are they going to do between university and starting the MBA? But I guess my question for you is, like, should there be any discussion of the post-college plans in this essay? So even though the essay does say, how will the Booth MBA help you achieve your long and, these sort of post-MBA goals, should they talk about what they're going to be doing before? Or would you say, no, you're going to tackle that in the short answer above, so you don't need to really get into it in this essay?
I think there's definitely a way to bring it into the essay without kind of ruining or repeating yourself. Obviously, the focus is on the immediate and long-term post-MBA career goals, but that very well could tie into your immediate goals as well. If you're planning to, if you're taking a specific role post-undergrad, to then use that as kind of a jumping board post-MBA as well. Like if you're planning to stay in the same career path, there is a way to bring that into the conversation. But also you don't want to, like I said, you don't want to repeat too much. You don't want to come off as, being very one track on your specific post undergrad goals. So there is a way to bring it in there. It shouldn't be the heavy focus though. I think with the immediate and long-term MBA goals, we're also not necessarily looking for something uber specific, like immediately post MBA, I'm planning to be a product manager at Google. And then in the long term, I want to start a career in cloud computing, right? It can be at that specific, but it can also be, I want to use the MBA to develop my skills in these areas and jump into X career field for X reasons, right? It doesn't have to be uber specific. But like I said, there is a way that you can kind of tie in what your post undergrad plans are if they're similar to what your post MBA plans are.
Okay, yeah, that's really helpful. I actually was speaking to a career services director at an MBA program last week, and they said something very interesting to me, which was that they love to know the kind of zip code of someone's career aspirations, but not necessarily the street address, which is, I think, kind of what you're getting at here, this idea of, like, they can have, especially if you're in college right now, this is a lot of projecting happening. You're thinking
Right.
many years down the line. So that's really helpful. The other question I had for you is about your second essay question, which is, a great way for you to get to know candidates outside of their, kind of career and all that stuff. And I wondered, to what extent would you advise someone giving this essay like a singular focus on something they're really passionate about and they do with their spare time that, they think is really interesting? Or is it better to take more of a mix and match approach where they might share a few different hobbies or activities or things that they do that make them unique? Is there any recipe there? I mean, I know you have a 250 word minimum, not maximum, so there is space to stretch out in theory. But what would you advise on this one?
So we always advise that it's in the candidate's best interest to portray themselves in the best way possible and take the pathway that they believe they can do that with. I've seen an entire second essay that was built around how somebody, they taught themselves how to make fudge over the coronavirus pandemic. And that has kind of changed their career goals and changed who they are as a person and taught them things about themselves that they didn't otherwise know. We've also had people break down, individual things that have happened at various points in their life. And both of those can be very effective if done the right way. Ultimately, you want to take the time to best describe what impact that has had on your life and why you feel that's important. If that's a singular thing that you can go extremely in depth about, and that's going to give us the best picture into who you are outside of just your professional life, that's great. If you have a bunch of different things that have shaped you, like many of us probably do, then go into that and lean into that, and you ultimately can develop just as good of a picture either way. It's just the difference in how you go about it. Kind of like Graham was talking about, sometimes you can live in a singular city and be in two different zip codes. So it's kind of the same thing as from the first essay. There's ways to go very, very specific, and there's ways to be a little bit more broad and still accomplish the same thing.
Okay, great. Yeah, appreciate that. So let's move on. I have some questions for Gina at Tepper. So the first one for you is, you have this question about why is the program a good fit? That's the main essay that we see here on screen. And I wondered, if you'd be willing to like elaborate on some possible reasons that a candidate could have. I mean, and is it fair to say, because I hear this sometimes, people say, I just would love to have the peace of mind, to get into a program while I'm still in university. Personal anecdote here. I remember when I told my parents I was thinking of doing an MBA, there were no deferred programs. So I was graduating from university, and I remember my parents saying, oh yeah, sure, right, you're going to go back to school, because I had to tell them that you don't do an MBA right away, you go and work for a while. And they said, we'll believe that when we see it. And so I would have loved to be able to say, well, I'm going to get an MBA in 4 years. Here's my acceptance letter. And now I'm going to go work for a while, because then they wouldn't have been able to tell me that I wasn't ever going back. But I don't know, what are you looking for here? Are there any advice that you have on this one?
Yeah, I mean, I do think a little bit is that peace of mind. You're the type of applicant that's very goal oriented. You have your aspirations set, but at the end of the day, you want to be at a place that makes you feel comfortable and could see yourself getting your MBA there when the time is right. And so, for us, it's can really be anything. Have you done a little bit more research about Tepper? The community, have you talked to people? Can you envision yourself there? And that's why you feel our program's a good fit for you. Maybe your career goals. We all have our strengths, and if you're looking at the curriculum and maybe some of the opportunities that the current students are having, again, is that something that's interesting to you? And can you see yourself maybe in that particular path? And so there's no answer. And certainly I think in the back of everyone's mind is that peace of mind, like, okay, this is set. I can, focus on a career for a couple years, take those risks, but it's set. I'm already admitted. But again, at the end of the day, I think it's, do you feel comfortable at this school? And so tell us what's attracting you to Tepper and why you think we're a good fit.
Yeah, and I think that dovetails really well with what I guess Jacob was saying at the outset of this session around the risk, the ability to take risks, and that, or maybe it was Eric. Now I'm getting confused, but either way, like this ability to have that flexibility, and really explore in that time between university and the MBA. I guess I would underline that word "our" in that essay. It sounds like I'm hearing you underline that a little bit, Gina. So that's really helpful. The next question I had for you is about your short answer, which we see again on screen here. I just wanted to ask you, what if I don't yet have a job and I'm not really sure where I'm going. I may have some ideas of what I want to do, but I haven't yet, landed an offer when I'm applying for that April deadline. What do I do with this question?
Just tell us. I mean, I think it's totally fine to have those goals and I'm hoping to hear back from companies if you've interviewed, just tell us. Because we also realize this might be a little bit more of a difficult time at the moment too, graduating, waiting for those job offers during this time. But it's as simple as just tell us, it's okay to not have that offer in hand. And it's great, it's fine that you do have the offer, but again, putting it on the resume, telling us what you either hope to do or what you're going to do that fall for a job is what we want to see.
Okay. Yeah. Excellent. Because I'm not 100% clued in on the timeline for job offers for undergraduates, but yeah, I would imagine that there may be some who don't yet have everything secured. So that's great to know that they can have some flexibility there. Eric, thanks for being patient as we went backwards through the alphabet here. I have a couple of questions for you. And the first one is not about something that's on screen here. It's about, you mentioned this earlier, but you guys require a resume, and you have this video that I managed to get some time to watch where you explain kind of, there are all these sort of, I guess, videos on the site that help undergrads who are thinking about an MBA kind of get up to speed. And on the resume, I just wondered if you could highlight some differences that an undergraduate resume may have, versus the types of resumes you're seeing for a traditional MBA program where people have been out in the workforce. I think it was Morgan earlier said, gosh, people may still have education at the top of their resume when they're not yet full-time employees and things. So anything you want to kind of touch on with respect to what you're looking for in a resume when it comes to an undergraduate who's applying?
So that's a great question, because I think we all ask for that resume and we all give people a sense of what we're generally looking for. It should be about a page long. It should contain the following sections and those particular pieces. But I think what's really valuable, and honestly, what I really love about reading these types of applications, is they lean into what we're feeling in the culture right now, which is a desire for meaningful work, and maybe not so much the cynicism that comes with it. So how does that play through functionally on a resume? Well, we really love seeing impact-oriented bullets as opposed to job function bullets, and more so when your resume is going to contain likely an internship, a part-time job that you're doing while you're on campus, while you're completing your undergraduate. Potentially it has some professional experience, because again, we will accept people who've completed a January graduation or from the summer before. So there are people who will collect some professional experience before submitting an application. But in all those spaces, generally speaking, your early career work is going to be very functional. And what we want to see is, but how does that play into the leadership attributes we're looking for? Show me how you're collaborative. Show me bullets that help me understand how you participated and supported your peers, your team, your unit, your industry. Again, stay away from the jargon that often gets captured there. I moved X number of widgets to Y. What we're really interested in is, I partnered with people, I collaborated, I worked with others, because those are those leadership attributes we're actually going to be seeking, the same ones that we're actually looking, the same competencies that we look for with our direct admissions programs. So that's what I think I would supplement to what's already on that site.
Yeah, very helpful. And I would encourage people to watch the little video that you guys have. I thought that was pretty useful when I encountered it. So the second question I had for you, Eric, is about this second essay. I know I've asked you about the first one before, so I figured we would change things up and go down this path. So I wondered with this question, I wondered to what extent candidates are expected to dig into the curriculum and the offerings at Haas and pepper in some comments around how, these are the areas that I'm hoping to develop. And actually, wow, this thing that you all do, as part of the first year curriculum will be helpful in me developing in this area? Or is it more big, sort of broader brushstroke, and they don't need to kind of dive into that level of kind of Haas specific referencing?
So this is both an easy and a tough question to answer. So I'll give you the glib answer first. We've already read our website, so we do not need you to repeat it to us in an essay, which is the answer that I give to many folks who is, well, I want to list the classes and show that I've done the research and I understand your institution. But there is actually a deeper answer to this, which is, what are we looking for with this essay? We're not trying to be overly clever here. It's exactly the way it's written. We start with a statement. We truly believe that leadership has changed. It's evolving. Certainly there's an acceleration in that evolvement that's happened over the pandemic period, where people have to learn how to lead others through remote and more distributed and global and with different access to technology. Well, all of us have experienced that, including anybody who's moved through an undergraduate program. We all have actually had a very unique experience that we all share. We have a frame of reference that we can draw from. And what we would love to understand is, well, what does a good leader look like in this evolving change? And all of our essays are 3 simple format essays. Give me an example from your personal life that relates to this question. Tell me what you've learned from that example, and tell me how it fits into your overall plan. Now, in the response to that answer, those 3 pieces, which I'll repeat because I think they're incredibly valuable, we want an example. We want to understand what you've learned from that example. And we want to understand how that fits into your overall plan that's in your application. That type of answer can include, and Berkeley Haas offers a particular program that helps me get to that journey. It's okay. It's not, we don't not want to see that you've done the research, but we want it to fit within that authentic framework. And with only 300 words to give us, you'll lose valuable real estate bulleting out courses on our website. And so apologies when I started with the glib answer, but that's really, hopefully it's helpful where I ended it.
No, I'm good with glib. I think I think it's a fair thing. And I think that the last point you're making about, wow, you've got 300 words, you might want to, be careful about wasting a whole bunch of them on, laying out stuff that's already on our website that we've read. Right. So I think that's really useful feedback. So I think we've kind of tackled the main things that we wanted to accomplish. And if you guys, I've got kind of a couple of lightning questions if you guys are willing to indulge. I love doing these. So we'll stick with Eric. I want you to describe the Berkeley Haas community in 3 words.
Sure. I imagine we're going to hear these same words, so I apologize if I'm going to steal them because I'm going first, and my apologies in advance. I think folks who are looking from the outside in on MBA programs sometimes worry that they're hyper-competitive environments, and then they discover that so many of them live in this one key phrase, which is collaborative. Right? This is where people meet other people and learn to build with each other and learn to create and learn to innovate and test their theories against one another. You're learning as much from your peers as you are from the faculty, the staff, and the centers and the institutes and the rest that are on these campuses. Collaborative is really central to our community and probably many other MBA communities. I think innovative is one that we lean into very heavily. When we think about innovative within our community, we think not only about entrepreneurial efforts, we also think about how you innovate in finance, in consulting. How do you innovate? How do you, to use a Berkeleyism that we love to use, how do you question the status quo in any and all environments that you are in, that you be an innovator? And I think among those 2 pieces, when you see how do they connect and how they blend together, we really kind of lean into the phrase culture. We lean into the culture of our community. And that culture presents itself as the diverse backgrounds and experiences of the people that are here, that presents itself in what is the location present to us in terms of people coming through. It's a town that has people coming to invent, to create. It has history that's been there. It has native peoples that were there as well, and see all these interactions in these spaces. That culture is really the linchpin of this experience.
Okay, excellent. Gino, how would you describe the Tepper community in 3 words?
Yeah, definitely engaged and supportive. And, I think that's important. You want to, it's again part of the community that Eric mentioned. You want to feel welcomed and supportive, but you're also able to turn around and help your fellow classmates as well. It's definitely a great place to be. I'd also, say I like the word innovative and collaborative as well. Again, I think that, as the business world changes, the program has to innovate as well and adapt to the changing needs. And again, through the curriculum, entrepreneurship, and just the opportunities that the students are given. So, all of our schools are great, but, I think you just have to figure out where you belong.
Got it. Jacob, how about you? 3 words that would describe the Chicago Booth community.
I'm going to switch it up and I'm going to say a lot of the same things in a different way. And the 3 words I would use are pay it forward. Pay it forward is something you hear about with the booth culture quite frequently. And it's kind of a philosophy that everybody buys into, not just in the student body, but within faculty, within the alumni of the university. Collaboration is key, working together. When our students are going through the recruiting process, they have more mock interviews set up through fellow students and alumni members than they do with the actual recruiting firms that they're working with or organizations that they're reaching out to. Alumni are constantly trying to come back to the university and bring different things to the student body because they want to share the booth experience that they had and they received that from their predecessors and they want to continue offering that to the community. So pay it forward is kind of the best way to describe the booth student community and kind of the booth community as a whole.
Excellent. Appreciate you coming up with some new new words for us to use here. Morgan, how about you? What about at Columbia Business School? Any 3 words that come to mind?
I've got 2 different words. So driven, collaborative, and kind. Starting with driven, I mean, it's New York City. We've got 2 beautiful brand new buildings. I mean, the pulse of the city is special, and our students are ready to hit the ground running, and they're going to make a difference in whatever industry they go into post MBA. And going to that collaborative piece, as we've all mentioned, they're going to help their classmates succeed and get to whatever plan A is. I think they're going to work together. And lastly, with the word kind, we always say on the admissions team, we're looking for good eggs. We want people that are going to be active contributors to our community, that they're going to push you to do better in the classroom. They're going to push you on your startup idea. They're going to help you prep for that banking or consulting interview when they're super busy too. I think the kindness links together the driven and collaborative nature of our students as well. So we're always looking for those good eggs to join us up at CBS.
Excellent. So let's stay with you, Morgan, for our second lightning round question. And this is just, what's one thing that a deferred enrollment candidate could do to stand out in your admissions process?
So for CBS, come to our events, talk to current students, talk to admissions officers. Virtually, we're doing a lot of stuff still. We hope to have visitors soon in our new buildings. Stay tuned, but definitely engage with us. We want you to get to know CBS. Because the more you are excited about CBS, the stronger your application will ultimately shine through.
Okay. Jacob, how about you? What's one thing that deferred enrollment candidates could do to stand out?
Very similar answer to Morgan, coming to our events, speaking with us, reaching out to our students, but also reaching out and being involved in the community as well. Not necessarily just having to be, professionally or, outside in professional organizations or, like clubs or organizations in sports, but community involvement as well is something that candidates can do to really stand out.
Okay. Yeah, that's helpful. Gina, how about you?
I'd say the same thing, engaged with the community. The more you know about the school, I do think it comes through in your application, especially with our essay question. And, I would just say, talk to the current students, or maybe if you've met some alums at your internships that you may have had, just again, the more outreach, the more connections you make, I think is better.
Okay. Eric, any advice from your side?
Sure. I think what we'd love to see is that you've begun the journey, right? So for us, what that looks like is if you told us that you want to solve a particular problem, you want to address an issue, you want to find yourself in a particular professional vertical, show us that you've started the work. in some way, shape, or form. Now, it's early yet, so maybe it's internship, maybe it's volunteer, maybe it's exploration. We love the energy. We love the nature of forward looking, but would love to see that you provide us a little bit of evidence along the way. And I think that's a huge standout for us. And of course, we'd also love you to stay in touch and get to know us as well.
Yeah. I guess I'd say kind of walk the walk a little bit. Like if they're going to be outlining these plans and things that they're interested in, it sounds like you'd love to see some evidence that they're, heading down the path a little bit, which is great. I appreciate you guys doing these lightning round questions. The next thing we're going to do is we're going to let our panelists escape into their private breakout rooms where they're going to wait for all of you to arrive with your questions. I did want to mention that we're going to give the panelists a minute or two, and I actually have some info to share with you all as we wait and let them get settled. And we will provide links here in the chat to each of the individual school breakout rooms so that you can go and get your questions answered. I think each of these representatives will probably stick around for anywhere from 15 to 30 minutes to kind of answer your questions as you have them. So just stay tuned. I did want to thank Morgan, Jacob, Gina, and Eric for taking part in this. Really appreciate your time. I know that you guys have a lot of things going on and always appreciate you coming by to do these events with us. And just some really great insights. I always feel like I learn a lot. It often makes me wish I could redo my my MBA, but really appreciate your time. And we'll let you go kind of sign off here and head off into your breakout rooms to await the candidates as they come in with their questions. But really appreciate all of you making time today.
Thanks so much.
Thank you. Thank you.
So, you're welcome. So those of you who are here, the candidates who are sticking around, we have a couple of tips here for you in terms of how you can be your best applicant as you go through the process. And by going through these tips, we'll give our panelists a couple of moments to get settled into their rooms. I did want to mention, I saw a number of questions around whether there would be a recording of this session. There is. It will be automatically emailed to everyone that joined us today, as well as those who registered and couldn't show up. So yes, you'll get the recording of this. And again, you can go into multiple rooms to ask questions of our representatives here, but you just do it one at a time because they're all Zoom rooms, so you can only be in a one at a time. But again, the reps will stick around usually for about a half an hour, so you should have plenty of time to dip in and out of a couple of rooms and get your questions answered. I did want to give a couple of tips. When it comes to deferred enrollment, my observations over the years have been that because there's not a large kind of amount of career kind of experience, professional experience for the admissions team to weigh, in your file, they often do look for good grades and high test scores and things. So that's kind of a hallmark of this. It's almost like because you don't have quite the professional profile to put forward, that having a decent academic profile or all those counting stats, as we call them, GMAT, GRE, and GPA, can really help. The next thing I would say, and I think we did touch on this in the session today, is leverage your on-campus leadership. That means if you're part of clubs, take those leadership opportunities. They count just as much as the summer internships or other job type things you could have. So don't lose sight of the fact that any kind of leadership you're engaged in on campus counts. You can get recommenders to write about it. You can, share it in an essay, et cetera. That's a perfect segue into the third point, which is you can look beyond the classroom for recommendations. Like you don't need to have just professors writing for you. There could be somebody in administration who's observed all the great work you've done as a campus leader in a club or a student organization. And obviously there could be professional recommendations if you've pursued internships. And then I thought it was really interesting that all of our guests kind of really pushed this fourth point, which was engage the community as you research programs. They really seem to want to have you, that you want to get on their radar, right? So by coming to events like this, you get on their radar, by reading their websites, learning about their community, reaching out to students, alumni, et cetera. Doing all that stuff really seems to have an impact in this process. And then the last thing I would say is try to demonstrate maturity. They're taking a bit of a risk in admitting college undergrads, right? And they're kind of trying to map out what are you going to be like in 2, 3, 4, 5 years. And it's hard for them because they're used to seeing candidates who are 25 or even, 27, 28 years old. And so it's hard. They don't have the same sense of what's your level of maturity going to be. And so to the extent that you can really show that you've got a good head on your shoulders, you kind of know what you want to do, why the MBA is going to be really pivotal as you head down that path, that'll go a long way in this process. So just as a reminder, we're going to post the links in the chat here to each of the 4 schools breakout rooms. You'll first jump in and you'll be in a waiting room. That's the first step, and we'll get you all in as soon as the panelist gives us the green light, which should be literally just a matter of moments. But I wanted to thank all of you for making time to come today. I love hosting these things, love seeing everyone join us from all over the world. So thank you so much. And please head on into the school breakout sessions and ask away. They're waiting for you to ask questions, and they'd love to hear from you. So thanks again, everyone, for tuning into this webinar. It's been a pleasure.